Well, right now I'm joined from the Syrian capital by freelance journalist Lizzie Felon to get an update on this attack. Lizzie, tell us what has happened.
Yes, well, actually, I was meant to be on the delegation of journalists traveling to Homs myself, so it is pure coincidence that I'm here speaking to you right now. So the delegation of journalists came under fire by a shell, and the French journalist, along with another Belgian journalist, stepped out of the car to take footage of the wreckage, and at that moment they were then hit by another shell. This is according to first-hand accounts of what happened, and the second attack killed the French journalist Gilles Jacquier and seriously wounded another Belgian journalist who is now reported to be in the hospital in Homs. 8 other civilians are also reported to have been killed, and approximately a further 11 people wounded. Now, this is being received by the Syrian authorities here, who gave permission for the journalists to make the visit to Homs as an attempt by armed groups in the country to sabotage a day where, as your report showed, hundreds, perhaps hundreds of thousands of people came out to rally in support of the government, and indeed the president came out and spoke about the importance of the people, at the same time taking part in the reform process, but also combating terrorism. So it's being seen very much as an attempt by these armed opposition individuals inside the country to portray a scene of chaos to the outside world, because as we know, since NATO or the West lost their vote in the United Nations because of the veto of Russia and China, it appears that there has been a different tact employed by the West, and we have of course had reports that they have been supporting armed opposition groups with the help of countries like Qatar and Turkey. Indeed, just a few days ago there was a report on the British Special Forces website saying that they believed that British Special Forces were giving logistics and financial and training support to armed opposition groups inside Syria by training them in places like Libya, for example. So really this is very worrying that to see journalists who are coming to try to journalists coming to try to report freely, and they obviously cannot do so without safety being guaranteed because of these armed groups inside the country.
There was an interesting poll that was made, Lizzie Felon, making a comparison between the support for President Bashar al-Assad before the unrest began and then one after. And this was done by a Qatar Foundation along with YouGov, which at this point says that the support for President Assad has actually grown ever since news surfaced and confirmed in many respects, but mostly, of course, the government being vocal that armed terrorists and gangs are responsible for what has occurred. And now the support for Assad to have grown. Is that how you see it? Is that a confirmation of how you have witnessed the Syrians and, of course, the support for the government there, and, of course, your views on and reflections on this recent poll?
Yes, well, I've been here in Syria for a few days now, and over the past couple of days, of course, Assad made another speech yesterday at the university, and today again. I was at the demonstration today where he unexpectedly made a surprise speech and came and joined the people, where he said he very much wanted to be amongst the people. And I witnessed an outpouring of support for the president. And of course, the United Nations has said that 5,000 people have been killed during this conflict, but they have been unable to confirm those reports. And of course, we know that there has been evidence of a very high number of people from the security forces and the military who have also been killed. And in fact, since I have been here, I have spoken to a number of people from different areas like Idlib and Homs and Hama and other areas who say that far from them being in fear of the army, that because of the threat of these arms groups, they actually would prefer to see a greater army and security presence in order to restore the stability to such areas.
And if you could tell us, based on some of the encounters that you've had or information in general, what do Syrians think of other countries? In particular, we could talk about Qatar maybe, or even the U.S. and other countries like Turkey perhaps in terms of their roles regarding Syria?
Yes, well, the countries that you named today, as a foreigner, a lot of Syrian people approached me to express their outrage at the role that countries like Qatar, Turkey, and others have played, of course, the United States, in supporting the opposition inside the country. And there is a lot of evidence to show that they have done so. And in contrast, countries like Russia, for example, which has played a much more neutral role, they are being received with a lot of gratitude by the Syrian people. And at the protest today, we saw a number of Iranian flags, Hezbollah flags, and Palestine flags as a great expression of solidarity amongst the people towards those nations for supporting them in this time when they perceive that the West and Israel and Qatar and a number of Arab countries are working very hard to create chaos in their country.
And finally,
of course, there is also a lot of anger towards Qatar in particular because of the coverage actually of Al Jazeera, with many people accusing Al Jazeera of fabricating reports of violence by the army against the Syrian people.
Well, since you're mentioning Al Jazeera, in general, it seems like the media outlets, even as the president said, about 60 of them are ramping up these events. But it seems, and please tell us if that's your interpretation also, that they're trying to make what the government says and pit their words against their words, meaning we're telling you this is happening, but the government is saying that anything that happens, for example, this incident that, you brushed death, it seems like, by not being on this bus that occurred with one reporter being dead, that they're turning around and saying, well, it's the government that's staging this. Do you get that feeling?
Yes, well, there is very much apparently a complete lack of objectivity. Of course, we see very little coverage of the pro-Assad demonstrations in the Western and much of the Arab press. Whereas, of course, it's not to say that there are not problems inside the country and there is not opposition or a desire for change or reform in the country, which, of course, the government it has in the last two speeches by the president indicated that they are very enthusiastic to address those demands. But in the press like Al Jazeera and BBC, or the Western press, for example, there is very much a desire just to push the narrative to portray a picture that the vast majority of Syrian people want regime change, when in fact, from my experience and the evidence from a number of other reports indicate that is very much not the case, and that there is very much a divergence of opinions in the country. And as you said, other polls have indicated actually a large proportion of support for the government.
Okay, we're going to leave it there. Thank you very much. Freelance journalist Lizzie Fellon from Damascus. We appreciate it.